The views expressed in the following show are of the host, the guest, and the callers. The content of the following show, its accuracy, authenticity, and the ramifications of the use or application of said content is the responsibility of those speaking and listening, not the broadcast medium.
For we are opposed around the world. For we are opposed around the world. For we are opposed around the world. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy. 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 By a monolithic.
Can you hear me?
And ruthless.
Yes, we are here live with Brian David Andersen, who is the researcher and creator of what you saw the beginning of, which is a documentary on the shooting of John F. Kennedy, which has happened November 22nd, 1963, which is the anniversary today. And I say shooting because Brian, who has been on the show before, has put forth the theory and evidence that he was shot and a person was put in its place who later on was shown to be dead and so forth. So he was removed from power rather than simply killed in public, and then an elaborate, ingenious type of a scheme was created and brought forth to have that to pull that off. And so we have with us today, Brian, to kind of walk us through. He's put together a special graphic presentation, which those watching live are seeing, but I will upload in a HD format a little later so that YouTube audience can see it as well. And so, My God, I Am Hit, or I'm Hit, MyGodI'mHit.com is the webpage that will bring you to see the original documentary. And we have on our webpage, if you're watching now, feettothefireradio.com. If you scroll down, there's a series of links, one of which will be all of the PDFs I will be showing on here. You can download for yourself or at least follow along on that webpage so that you could see the evidence later on and keep looking into it. So I think I'd said all of that, so welcome to the show, Brian.
Oh, thank you very much. And again, just reviewing, they can go to My God, I'm Hit. That's MYGOD. And then I am Hit, HIT, /FTF. I didn't put a 2 in there. I put a T, make it a little bit easier. So FTF .html. And you can follow along on the pictures there. And below each picture is a link to also download a PDF file. And again, there's no copyright on this. You can use it in any way or form that you want to. So we're not selling a product today. We're just selling information and providing information. And since 52 years ago, the investigation into the incident on Elm Street has been divided into two sections. Number one is those that believe the Warren Commission and that Oswald acted alone, and he used one rifle, and that was it. Then there's the whole other group that feel that there was a conspiracy, and he was basically shot multiple times by multiple locations, and it was, again, some sort of conspiracy, and feeling that the Warren Commission was just basically a cover-up and a whitewash. What I'm about to present today is a third type of view. The first two groups, as we talked about, their common denominator is that JFK did in fact die, and they're both very much attached to that particular type of scenario. Especially now you have the two groups we mentioned before, the pro-Warren Commission. In many ways, the reason why they're pro-Warren Commission is because the viewpoint of JFK was more of a villain. They did not like his politics, hence they just, he got killed in a simple manner, that's it, let's just go do it, arrest. The other group is now saying no, it was a conspiracy, but many of them also have an emotional attachment because JFK is also their hero. He is their prodigal son type of thing. And so when you bring a third type of scenario and where JFK is not killed, and there are some other things that did happen, and also bring the evidence forward for that, these groups can get very, very emotional. And I found that over the years. I've been now doing this since 2007. And around 2009, I was on a radio program with an individual and bringing some of the preliminary evidence forward, and he got really kind of turned on by it. And I said at the end of the program, I said, why don't you come and join me? So that's exactly what this person did. However, they are in mainstream media, and they cannot really be associated with this really highly, highly controversial type of approach to this. But this person has been a very, very key investigator, very key undercover person to do a lot of skullduggery and finding a lot of facts, etc. So when I use the word we, that's what I mean by we, myself and this per se hidden partner. So we first start off, hopefully now everybody is at the webpage. Again, that's the My God, I'm Hit / FTF and then .pdf, or you can go to .html.
And if you're actually watching on this video, of course, we'll be seeing these things here, so you don't have to go anywhere. But go ahead.
Okay, all righty. And so first one we look at is JFK-1. And we see here that there are two pictures. One is a guy by the name of Floyd Boring, and the other one is Gerald Benn. They were two top Secret Service agents, and they were not in Dallas. This was a very, very key aspect that is really overlooked by, again, most of the people that have investigated JFK. Also, you'll see on the left there, this is a confidential report. It's a Secret Service report. And it was buried and hidden in the JFK, or not JFK, but the LBJ library. Oddly enough, it wasn't in the National Archives. This particular type of report that was done by the Secret Service, and there was also a follow-up report also to it to summarize it. Both of those reports were pretty much buried in the LBJ library. They don't block access, but basically nobody knew about this particular type of report, even up to 3 or 4 years ago. It really was not that known. Even on the internet, it was not known that much. So we've set now some real key things here. We have the Secret Service report we're going to refer to on numerous occasions. And we also have now the fact. Again, what we're going to present here now is much fact as possible. Some places we'll do some conjecture, but most of the things you're going to be looking at now are the facts. And that fact is Boring and Benn, especially Benn, who was the real personal bodyguard of JFK, was not there. Had he been in Dallas, he would have been right by the limousine. And then basically it would have been a totally different scenario, but he was not there. I'm also going to refer to the presidential limousine as the 100X. That is what the Secret Service called the limousine was called the 100X. So now we have that basis of where we're going here. So now we go to JFK-2, and because those two Secret Service agents were not in Dallas, they then pulled up another individual to come also be part of this whole tour that JFK did throughout the South. And his name was Glenn Bennett. He was not a field Secret Service agent. That was very, very important. He was basically a pencil pusher. And this was his first time into the field. And this was actually fortuitous for our history, etc., because he was there. He was sitting in the right rear seat of the Secret Service car that was right on the bumper of the 100X. When the first shot fired, all the rest of the trained agents turned towards what they thought was where the shot was coming from. Bennett did just the opposite of what everybody else was trained. He turned and looked at the president. And this is very, very key. That evening, on November 22nd, 52 years ago tonight, Bennett then hand-wrote all of what he saw. He then also, the next day on the 23rd, typed it out. And as we can see his words now, he says, immediately upon hearing the supposed firecracker, looked at the boss, the president, boss's car. At that exact same time, I saw a shot that hit the boss up, and then that's important here, a shot that hit the boss, and then that's why I put it in red, about 4 inches down from the right shoulder. This contradicts everything that's ever the Warren Commission has said, where it was shot in the neck, etc. Now, what's interesting about this quote is it was entered into the Warren Commission. Glenn Bennett was not called to testify before the Warren Commission. Here, the guy that actually turned and saw the president was just very, feet away from him, and he's not called to the Warren Commission to make a testimony. But what the Warren Commission did is they then edited his handwritten and both his typed statement. They stopped the sentence after the last boss. So then about 4 inches down from the right shoulder was simply then edited out. But it's in the Secret Service report. That's what we found, this gold nugget in the Secret Service report. We just found it maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And again, this changes everything, is that here we see something 4 inches down from the right shoulder. What does that mean? It's not in the back, etc. And again, Glenn Bennett, he died in the 1970s and pretty much then went into obscurity. But now what's important here is his location being right there, and can we now find a way of corroborating? Can we find some sort of supporting evidence for his visual of seeing the president being shot in the right shoulder, 4 inches down from the shoulder? And now let the audience basically decide for yourself. Let's look at the facts. We now go to JFK 3. And that is a picture of the Zapruder film, and it shows a name there. It says June Dishong. She was standing less than 15 feet away from the president when the first shot fired. She then went up to her, she was a secretary in downtown Dallas, and she wrote in her diary what she saw. And in 1997, that's when the diary was finally released after she died. Her family didn't even know that they knew she was in downtown Dallas, but they didn't know how close she was. It wasn't until they read her diary that they then realized of what she was describing. And she saw then, what a key thing here is she said his arm slipped off the side of the car. And so that's all she said about when the first shot fired. And now how does that corroborate? We have to look at other types of also both visual and also written testimonies. So here she is. She's less than 12 feet away. Now Bennett is at the 6 o'clock position of JFK, and June Dishong is at the 3 o'clock position. So now we go to the next one, and we'll see how all this now ties together. And then we go to JFK 4, and this is Roy Kellerman. He was sitting in the right passenger seat of the 100X. And as the first shot fired, he made the statement to the FBI on November 27th, 2 days after everything all happened. And he said, this is the FBI agent quoting what was told to him by Kellerman. Upon turning his head to the left, he observed President Kennedy with his left hand in back of him, appearing to be reaching for a point on his right shoulder. So now we have like a 3D type of way of looking at this whole first shot scenario. What's also important, we'll come back to this, or we'll review this again, but because there's another one, we're going now to JFK, we'll go down to JFK 4A. And we now see the positions where everybody was. Glenn Bennett was at the 6 o'clock position of JFK. Roy Kellerman was at the 12 o'clock position. And June Dishong was at his 3 o'clock position. These are the closest people that were to JFK, other than Jackie and other persons like Connolly. But as far as eyewitnesses, and all of their testimony pretty much now dovetails together. We basically can summarize now is that Bennett then looks at the president as being shot. He sees that the bullet go into the right shoulder. June Dishong then sees the first shot, and she sees his arm slip off the side of the car, which is very important. She just basically, what everybody said also is he slumped into his seat. So there's a key thing she also didn't see, what a lot of the other eyewitnesses did not see, and we'll cover that in a little bit. But again, now she sees his arm slip off to the side, which is exactly what you would see if he got shot in the shoulder. And then the next thing is Roy Kellerman now hears the shot, and he turns and he sees the president reaching with his left hand going to his right shoulder. So now, is there any type of evidence to also physical evidence to support that? But before also we go forward to the physical evidence, we'll go now back to also Roy Kellerman. And this is where the whole title of the book, Everything All comes from. One of the key things that when the first shot was fired is that Roy Kellerman heard JFK shout, "My God, I'm hit." And he said this in his Secret Service testimony. He said it in his FBI testimony, and he said it in his Warren Commission testimony. He never changed that. He said, "My God, I heard, my God, I'm hit." Some of the people in the Warren Commission tried to really push him and say, "Well, how can you hear that? How could you hear that?" And he said, "I have been trained. I know the president's voice. I can hear his voice over an entire crowd. That's the way I was trained." So he pretty much held his position. But there is a problem with this, though, is that you see now Dr. Robert McClelland in the same picture. Dr. McClelland held the forceps as the victim was brought into Parkland Hospital. He held the forceps on the throat wound. And I interviewed Dr. McClelland, and I asked him, I said, could the wound that you saw in that throat, could anybody shout or even whisper any type of words whatsoever? And he said, "No way. There's no way that could happen. That the person could not speak. They couldn't whisper. They couldn't do a thing." I then read him Roy Kellerman's quote, and he was shocked. And this is part of the reason why this whole thing has gone unresolved and not solved for so many years, is because there's key persons like him, and the two of them, both Kellerman and Dr. McClelland, they never really, got together. Now with the internet, when things happen, we all can, kind of come together and we can compare things. And these people stayed isolated from one another. Kellerman knew nothing about what McClelland saw, and McClelland didn't know anything about what the testimony of Kellerman was. So that's why, again, there are so many ways that this thing didn't get solved, because simply the way of communications was done in the 1960s. Now, Dr. McClelland is holding a shirt. This is the actual shirt that he wore that day, and there is a blood stain on it. And when I saw this picture, I interviewed Dr. McClelland twice, and then I told him, I said, there are DNA tests that what we can do is that we can pull off the DNA there, and what they can determine is the person's hair color and their eye color. We don't need a second blood test to really actually compare. We can also, just by simply pulling it off, if the blood that's on there has brown eyes and brown hair, that's not JFK. He had blue eyes and red hair, and that will show up in DNA tests. So I pushed him to do this, and basically then he pretty much stopped all communication with me, because I really feel that he is going to probably wait until after he expires. I don't think he's really wants to have the tension, and to have, if it does come back where it's not him, well, that changes a lot of things. One thing I did accomplish, though, is he would run around with this shirt constantly. He would go to JFK, conventions and things like that, and had this shirt, in a little plastic baggie. And I said, and he kept it in his home. And I said, you need to put this in a safety deposit box. You need to get it out of the house.
Absolutely. This is hotter than if you had a piece of Roswell spaceship. This is hot.
Yeah. So
This is
at
huge.
the very least, I accomplished that where now it's in a safe, secure place. So if somebody, breaks into his house and takes the shirt and then does something that makes it look like a robbery, that can't happen. We're basically secure. So it's now that's a blood stain that is waiting there to be tested. And it's all up to Dr. McClellan himself, and probably then after he dies, it'll be up to his heirs whether they want to do anything with that stain. But feel very confident. I am 99% sure that blood stain does not have red hair and blue eyes. That's a very, very low percentage of the population has that. So based upon all the rest of the evidence that we're going to produce here, is that I feel confident that when that blood stain comes back, it's going to shock a lot of people, but it'll vindicate also what we're saying here.
Talk
too.
about
It's
a
also
smoking
gonna support
gun.
it.
This gun is on fire,
Yeah, really.
Wow.
It's sitting there. So again, I feel privileged though to have been be part of it, to interview Dr. McClellan, and basically again this whole thing about my God, I'm hit. So the key thing is here. There's no way that being shot through the throat that could any person say, my God, I'm hit. So that means the only way that he could have said that is if he was shot in the shoulder, not in the throat. So we have another indication here that, yes, there's another little tidbit that we're saying, yes, this first shot went into JFK's right shoulder. Next thing also is that we ordered all of the clothing from the National Archives. I got copies of it. It cost me around $1,000 to get all of these copies and in high resolution, etc. So when I called up the National Archives, I said I would like to have the latest pictures of JFK's jacket. And she goes, oh, okay. And we were sitting there talking, and she goes, you really need to also get this the picture that was done by the FBI for the Warren Commission. And I said, oh, well, okay. And I really wasn't that interested because I really wanted the latest one. And so then the thing kept on, and we talked for about a half hour on the phone and, getting the order done and everything. And every time, about every 5-10 minutes, she would say, you really need to get this Warren Commission exhibit here. And I said, well, okay. And so finally, it was the end of the conversation. It's just, I tell you what, I'll throw this in for extra, it was costing me $200 like a picture or something like that. And she said, I'll throw this in for $50 for you. And I said, okay, all right. So threw it in. I paid my bill and everything. And then I hung up from that phone conversation. And I'm going, what happened there? And so when the pictures came in, that was the very first one that I went to. And I went to the right shoulder and then basically did no other types of manipulations. All I did is just add some brightness to it and a little bit of contrast, nothing else. And what we see here is a stain on the right shoulder with a definite type of hole. We'll also look at the bullet hole that's in the mid-back area, and there's no blood stain around it. So there would be normally a blood stain. So this one also, the blood stain on the shoulder makes sense because, number one, he got shot in the shoulder. Then he's now leaning off to his left. That's why the blood stain now seems to go upwards, because he was actually leaning over. Had he remained sitting up during those first critical minutes, then the blood would have dripped down. So this follows with it. Yes, he leans over, and now the blood stain, the blood is going up his shirt and up his jacket.
Is there actually a hole there in the where
you can actually when you get the real high resolution, see the little black right there where I say real bullet hole. That's a black area, which means is that there's no cloth there. That's a hole.
Okay.
So
all right, I'm zooming in on that. Now we're getting.
So if you zoom in, anybody who, if you want a high quality picture, these things cost a lot of money. I'd be glad to also provide you my copies. Again, I paid big bucks for them, but if you've got some other real fancy type of thing, I just use Photoshop with this. But if you've got some other thing that can really go down and look at this, because they're very high resolution, they're like 3,000 DPI.
Yeah, we can see the black spot. You can see it. You can see it
so it's there. Yeah. So, and if you reverse it, you put it on a reverse color and you make it a negative, there is a white spot right there. So it definitely stands out. If you on various
it looks to me like they also, when they took this picture, It looks like it might have tried to close it up a little bit because it looks elongated rather than like a circle.
Yeah, exactly. But also, too, that's probably what the bullet would do. It would make it a little bit elongated as it came in and ripped. It wouldn't probably leave a perfect hole.
Oh, okay.
It would
I've never seen one,
type.
so I don't really know.
Yeah. So it would do a rip type of thing. And so when I looked at the now latest pictures, of course, they were all cleaned up. There was no stain. And also, when you look at the different types of cut, the way that they cut the jacket and various things like that, when you compare the FBI, this particular type of suit jacket with now the new photographs, they're not even the same jacket. They don't have any of the same things at all the cut downs and everything else like that. So what it appears to be is that the Warren Commission did not have time enough to make a fake jacket, so they just had to go with this one, and they didn't really, think that somebody was actually going to, take it and blow it up, and actually then look at it. So, in actuality, my partner went to the school book depository, and they had a big picture of this, but it was darkened, and when they looked. Because now, we know what the testimony was by Kellerman and all the other people and by the other Secret Service agent. They looked at the shoulder and said, yeah, there's something there. And that's what
I just zoomed in on your enhanced photo. I was looking at the original. I zoomed in on the enhanced photo, and you could see all the tearing of the material. Yeah. So that's...
So basically, we have now physical evidence to now say, okay, looks like there's something here to this right shoulder shot. So if now the right shoulder occurred, this changes the whole scenario. What's going on here? Is this a fake job? Is this, what's going on? How can we tie all these per se pieces together? So the next now picture is JFK 7. And it also goes back to June Dishong and all of the other eyewitnesses, which is very key here. This has been analyzed by both the pro and con Warren Commission investigators. They went and looked at every testimony that was ever made on November 22nd, 52 years ago, or within 2 or 3 days after or even actually within 1 year. And all of the eyewitnesses, all the Secret Service, all the police officers, everybody, not one person saw JFK grab for his throat. Not one person said, I saw the president grab for his throat. Everybody said he just slumped into his seat. That was it. That was the main testimony by everyone. And not one person saw him grab for his throat.
Does this picture have him slumping? I mean, should I zoom in on it, or is this just a stock photo?
No,
okay, all right. Gotcha.
Because again, what I wanted to do is illustrate that all the people that were on Elm Street, all of these eyewitnesses, including June Dishong, when she put it in her diary moments after everything occurred, she mentions nothing about him grabbing for his throat. It's only after the Zapruder film is then released. We now have the next thing of Dan Rather. I would recommend people come back to this and play this. And he saw the Zapruder film on November 23rd. And it's interesting, again,
I can play that if you'd like.
I'd rather have that. If we do, let's do it when we come.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Hour.
You just let me know.
But basically, it's there for. I'll just summarize real quick, and then you can also listen to his testimony. Okay. And basically, again, he says nothing about JFK grabbing for his throat, and he sees now the Zapruder film 1 day afterwards. So what are we indicating here? That the Zapruder film was manipulated. And that's a real key thing, is that, yes, there's all indications that we have some sort of manipulation going on here. So now we look at the actual frame where he comes out behind the Stemmons Freeway sign. This is the Zapruder film. And we look now at, comes off of Life magazine. I copied these off of Life magazine, and they published these in 1964, 65. And as you can see now, this is the arms of JFK. And the animation artists, they tried their very best but this is not a really good job. It makes JFK looks like he's deformed. It looks like his shoulder, his arm is coming out of the mid portion of his shoulder. So this was an attempt by the animation artists. And yes, they did have the ability. They had lots of abilities to do a lot of the manipulations. If not, if you doubt that, go see the movie Mary Poppins. It was made in 1961-62. And they could do a lot of manipulations with film. Not anywhere near what we could do today. This would be probably a very simple job and make it look really good. But in 1963,
it does look pretty. It does look pretty goofy.
It looks comical.
Looks like there's somebody putting their hands around him from behind almost.
Yeah,
I mean that would be more physically possible than the way it's his own hands.
Just don't. This is where again we had deal with a thing called cognitive dissonance. Both the groups, both pro and con Warren Commission, at this point in the, even earlier, they've gone into a state of cognitive dissonance, which means is we presented these facts, and you have two ways to deal with these facts: to go into a paradigm shift, or to then basically just ignore them. And that's what cognitive dissonance means. Is basically, here's the facts. I don't want to deal with the facts. I just ignore them. And you go into the state of cognitive dissonance. And by this time, most pro and con Warren Commission people, they're already way distanced into cognitive dissonance. They don't even want to deal with this, or they do. They get very, very emotionally reactive. So just again, if you're new to this thing and you really haven't paid attention that much, or you have not really done thorough investigations on JFK, just look at this picture. And does this make any type of sense that a human being, even with the cameras were again kind of grainy and that type of thing, but it wouldn't be that bad off where it actually looks like his arm is coming out of the mid portion of his shoulder, and that's the best the animation artist could do at the time.
Because they had to cover up his throat, because they couldn't let the throat be saw, because wouldn't be a shot there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So now, how then, if he was shot on the shoulder, and they're faking this, grabbing his throat, then who arrived in Dallas, in Parkland Hospital, with a hole in their throat? I mean, that did happen, and we're going to address that issue. And this is going to get rather graphic as we get along here now. So now we look at also another frames of the Zapruder film, and these are the key frames as the major shot comes into supposedly JFK. And these are frames 312, 313, and 314. And as you can see here now, Jackie has her left hand on his shoulder in 312, and then there is this explosion, literally explosion on the right side of JFK's head. And right immediately, there's only one frame of that. That's what's sort of interesting here is this explosion only lasts one frame. And then it goes into a circle right on the side of his head. And that circle has nothing to do with JFK himself at all. There's no spout coming out. That circle is totally independent from his own body.
I'm going to zoom in on these frames so we can go by one.
And we'll have some other zoom-ins on them here coming up, too.
Okay.
And so we're going to examine these even a little bit closer a little bit later. So now the question being is, we have this massive explosion that is by the president's head. But now there's an interesting fact here. Penn and Teller, and there was also a scientist who was a friend of JFK's, and what they did is they took a melon and wrapped it in metal tape. Supposedly, according to physicists, that's a very close facsimile to a human skull. And so they took a melon, or two of them actually, and then they shot it with the Carcano rifle that supposedly Oswald used. And they put it to the sticks, as you can see there on that left picture. This is one frame from the Penn and Teller show. And they shot it up, and boom, you can see there's this big explosion. It's also really massive in the actual film itself, but I'm just using this one frame. And so you can see here is that the person who should have been, sitting next to JFK, which was Jackie, she should have been soaked in blood, tissue, and bone. I mean, from the top of her head, and in that frame there, it actually blows off the hat that she was wearing. And so she should have been soaked from head to toe. And when she's now standing in Air Force One, and when she rolled into Parkland Hospital, according to eyewitnesses, the upper portion of her body was in pristine condition. Her skirt had blood on it, but everything from waist high was all pristine. She had no blood whatsoever, not on her face, not anywhere. And so even some of the persons that I really respect on the con of, or, you know, they have the disagree with the Warren Commission, but I agree, or I'm really impressed with their credentials and their research. They even have said to me privately, you know, this has really bothered them. Why did she show up in Parkland and she didn't have really any blood at all in her upper portion of her body? And we'll get into that in just a moment.
Is it the same coat that she had when she was in the car?
Yes, that was everything.
Okay.
Everything was all the same. There was nothing. Again, that's all been verified and checked. Also, is that these are all the same clothes. There was never any change of clothing whatsoever. So again, why does she show up in pristine condition? Why is this explosion on the side of his head? And there's just one frame, and then there's just one frame of that circle that occurs, just one frame, and then it goes on, and then it goes on to all these distortions. But these are the key 3 frames of Zapruder. And so we're going to try to put all this together. We're going to try to tie all this together now. We also now have a close-up now of that circular type of picture. On the left is the official Warren Commission exhibit. And they're saying that the bullet entered from the back and then went out the front. And as you can see, the back of JFK's head is still intact.
Yeah.
Look at that, still intact. So this whole illustration with the Warren Commission is just bogus. I mean, it's just ridiculous. We also now, what I did, I put this thing into an AutoCAD program, and if you were to take out frames, which they had to do, they had to take out frames of that explosion, and they had to take out frames of basically what we're looking at is there was some sort of explosion by the side of JFK's head.
Let me ask you for a minute. Do you know the frames per second this film was originally?
Again, it was the camera type right now. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's a 16 millimeter frame. And what they did is you did 8 millimeters on one side and you did 8 millimeters on the other. So it was 16. It had a very, very sharp lens on it. And again, the frames per second, I can look that up.
Well, I was just curious. I was just kind of curious because to have that
normal
to have go from one
professional camera
to go from one frame to the next frame and to the next frame and have that dramatic a difference. You know, it's got to be going. You can't be. It wouldn't even. It's so fast.
Yeah, it had to have been at least 30 frames per second.
Yeah, I
so
mean,
basically, and if you were taking out frames, though, you had to take out these frames because it would show the other circles. Had there been more than 2 circles of different size, boom! Now this whole thing takes on a different tone.
I mean, I bring this up because this to me would be very good evidence that there were frames removed, because with the speed of the camera and then the 3 frames of a result, there's a lot missing.
Yeah, so I'm sure that it's a professional camera, or somewhere in between the two. It was not an amateur camera, but it wasn't a total professional. And I'm pretty sure it was probably around 30 frames per second. Even if it was 25 frames per second, you still should see something there. And you do in other frames where they really get down to minute. But here, you just go from bang, bang. And what I did now is to draw these circles in, and these had to be the frames that were removed. So what happened on the right shoulder? Well, let's have a look here. Gene Hill and Mary Moorman were standing on the side of Elm Street. And in fact, they said that in the film, they were actually on the curb. And the film has them actually up on the grass, which means this film could also be a composite, where one sweep was done one time, and then as the car came by, they did it a second time, and they put the two of them together because they swear that they were right on the curb. But now when the first shot went off, then Gene Hill came on. It's a frame from a movie that was taken of her, and she stated she saw a white dog between the president and Jackie. Now, what was she really seeing? A white dog. That doesn't make, but there was some sort of, she said dog, but there was some sort of white object between her and the president. And so what we're looking at here is on the tarmac of Love Field, we can see that Jackie is carrying a hand puppet. It has now been researched up and down and sideways and forwards did somebody give this puppet to Jackie on the tarmac of Love Field? And the definite answer is no. Jackie also had a purse that she brought with her. She was carrying a purse. So possibility this hand puppet came in and out of that purse. But what's very important now about this one frame, it's on 312, is that you can see here, what I did is outline it. And it looks like there's something on her hand.
Yeah, definitely.
There are many people now claim that that's shadows, which I think that's ridiculous, is that a shadow would not make her hand 3 times the size of what it's supposed to be. So basically what we're looking at here is that there is her with her left hand, and she is left-handed, and the shot goes into his shoulder. She now brings over her left hand onto his right shoulder. It's my contention that was actually what the puppet was for. It was a cover for a pyrotechnics device. And we go, the testimonies of 3 people were very, very important here. And that is Nell Conley, who was up in the seat right in the front, and Roy Kellerman and Sam Kinney. They all testified that they then were rained down upon. According to the ballistic tests, Nell Conley should have also been splattered and soaked, but she wasn't. She said, I was rained down upon like buckshot. She was a big rifle person. Roy Kellerman said, this sawdust just floated right on top of me.
Now, let me stop for 1 second.
Kinney,
Let me stop. The next one, we're on JK12. We're on JK12, right? At this moment?
Yes, pardon me,
okay.
JK12.
All right, now, as we zoom in on that top picture, you can see something on her hand. I mean, without any kind of fancy anything, there's something on her hand. I don't know.
And all the people that are anti, especially the ones that are anti-Warren Commission, they contend that these are shadows. This is just shadows happening on her hand. And again, you make your own judgment here, listeners. Does this look like somebody's hand?
If someone would have showed me this just like this and said, what is that? It looks to me like it would be some kind of bouquet or something, that she's some kind of a thing. But she does have gloves on, it looks like. So, whether it's a puppet or a bouquet, it still could be a pyrotechnic device. Yeah,
so she was covering something. Mm-hmm. Let's put it that way. So this either was a bouquet of flowers or it was a puppet. But again, this also fits that this puppet here is white. And Jean Hill she said, I saw a dog, but could have been very easily, again, it's just a flash. It was actually the puppet that she saw, not the dog.
Now, this is kind of wild that you have the president's wife in the car with him with a hand puppet on. I mean, doesn't it sound kind of like, didn't somebody go like, what's up with the puppet,
Yeah.
It seems a little strange.
Yeah, so the key thing is the 3 people. You had Nell Conley, Kellerman, and Sam Kinney. Sam Kinney is now the driver of the Secret Service car. It's right on the bumper, and he too also testifies, I was rained down upon. I had all this stuff fall on top of me. And that is more of the characteristics of something blowing off. That pyrotechnics device blew off, went about 30, 40 feet in the air. When you take that frame also and you look at it, you actually can see the debris up in the air. And then it rained down. It literally then floated down on everybody. And nobody was splattered. And this is why Jackie was not soaked from her head all the way down to her waist, is because the pyrotechnics device just blew right past her. There's no other explanation. Why did she not be soaked? And the only reason being is that the pyrotechnics device, it blew off and it went right past her. So now at the same time, we're going to go to the next frame. And this is now even gets more interesting. If they're blowing off this pyrotechnics device, she's shot in the shoulder, pyrotechnics device, they've taken frames out of the film. Why are they doing this? Well, it is my contention is that there was 2 other people in the trunk of the car. And one of them we nicknamed the handler, and the other one was the switchman. The switchman most likely was an individual who looked very similar to JFK. They told him that this was going to be a drill. But when the shooting really started, the handler took probably something like a .22, and he shot the person in the neck so he would not make any type of noise. Then he pulled out a .45, and he shot point blank right into the forehead, which goes right with all every doctor at Parkland all saw a front head wound, and the back wound was an exit. That's what they all saw, and this was the only place that it could have occurred would have been in the trunk. The Secret Service supervisor, Ford Boring, to me is the top suspect of being the handler. When he went in front of the Warren Commission, they asked him where he was on November 22nd, and 52 years ago, he claimed that he was washing his windows in his home. I'm quoting it. That's not, I didn't make that up. And so also the Dallas County sheriff named Bill Decker was in a police car in front of the 100X. And he turned around, heard the shot, and he saw a bullet ricochet off of the cement. Now, why is that so important? Well, basically, again, when that .45 went off, it blew right through the head. It blew right through the floorboard. Now we're talking about suction, okay? And so it's now taking with it blood and brain matter, etc. It ricochets off the street. Now you would think, with being the Dallas County Sheriff, wouldn't you want to know where that bullet that he saw ricochet, where did it go? Wouldn't you want to put a search on for it? He didn't do a thing whatsoever. And we'll get to the reason why in just a moment. So now we have it that we have two more key people here. We have the handler and we have the switchman. And the poor switchman, again, was told this was going to be a drill, and it turned out not to be. And basically now, after the shooting has occurred here, they now have to do the whole rest of this time now is to do the body switch. And again, I contend that the television show Mission Impossible was based upon what happened in Dallas, because the elite love to tell you what they have done, and they're going to tell you first off what they're going to do, then they'll tell you how they did it, and then they'll go out and do it, and then they'll come back and say this is how we did it.
Now you talking about the original show in the 60s?
Yeah, on the original, yeah, the 1960s.
So they didn't have something really close to this, but just the concept of the Impossible Missions Force.
Yeah, and Mission Impossible. That's where I think the idea came from this, and then the powers that be used their influence to have that particular program put on, because that's their way of saying, okay, this is the way we did it, and they don't care what medium they use to tell you how they did it.
All right, so let's stop and look at this picture for a minute. So you're saying there are two people in the trunk, and this trunk physically could handle that, I would imagine.
Well, now that's a good question there, because people have also sent me pictures. This is a 1961 Lincoln Continental. My father bought a 1962 or 1964 Lincoln, which is basically almost this, when it came to Ford and Lincolns, it was almost the same thing as 1961. And I actually drove a Lincoln Continental when I was 16 years old. But the difference here is that this car was modified. And we'll see different type of modifications. One major modification that was done, and so they bought it from Lincoln, from Ford, but then it went to a really special house, which also had a lot of government connections, CIA, NSA, all sorts of connections, and they then modified this car. So that's what we don't know. We don't know what all the modifications were underneath. We're going to get here in just a moment about one of the key modifications that we can prove that they did that was in no other type of Lincoln. But I contend is that if they wanted to pull this off, basically, yes, they could create the compartments that they needed. And it's also, there is a lot of indication that over the years of investigation, there may have been a secret 100X also. There may have been a second one. And so this may be the second one, and it was modified. It probably ended up, being dumped in the ocean very quickly afterwards, and then the other one took its place. What's important about this is, we'll get into this, but that LBJ had the car totally dismantled within 3 days after. And by November 27th, the car was totally dismantled. So either the replacement car was taken, dumped, or the real car then was dismantled, or both of them. What is key? This is an incredible next statement in JFK 13A. This is a statement that was done by Clint Hill, who was the personal bodyguard of Jackie Kennedy. He is the person now that's on the top of the limousine in JFK 13. That's the Secret Service agent there on the car. And he made an incredible statement as he is now reaching towards, and he was on the Secret Service car in the back, and he started hearing the shots. Sam Kinney and the lead people of the Secret Service told all of the Secret Service men to stand down, not to go towards the car. That's already been established. But then Clint Hill was not under their direction. He was totally independent, and that's why he took off. And then you can see here in the frame, that's Zapruder film, that's Clint Hill right on the trunk of the car. He makes the statement both in his Secret Service report and also in his Warren Commission report. And he says the second one, that's the shot, had almost a double sound, as though if you were standing against something metal and firing into it. That would be, again, when that handler shot the poor victim, the switchman, the bullet went through and through the floorboard. That's the metal. And then you hear both the sound of the gun going off and the sound of the cartridge hitting the metal place. So now he's on the trunk of the car. Just as he's reaching for the car, this is what he hears. Now keep in mind, there are two motorcycles on both sides of the limousine. So there's no way he's going to hear a cartridge and a second shot coming from anywhere around on the grassy knoll or the railroad or the school book depository. The only place that that gun could have been is in the trunk. And he also said he heard an echo. The shot had an echo, and the echo would be the ricochet. So he basically described the poor switchman being shot by the handler. That's his verbal testimony. So the next thing is now the bullet has ricocheted. Now, again, the Bill Decker doesn't seem to, have any type of interest in where that bullet went to, but a deputy sheriff by the name of Buddy Walters, before he was a deputy sheriff, he was a cab driver and worked in restaurants as a cook. So he really didn't have all that much skills. And he came across, eyewitness came up to him and said, there is a slug, a 45 slug with blood, bone around it. And so then an FBI agent came along and picked up the bullet. Now, Buddy Walters witnesses all this. These pictures are taken by a Dallas Times-Herald photographer, as you can see. So basically, we have a major crime being committed by this Officer Barrett because he is now tampering with evidence. And Buddy Walters then goes to the county sheriff's department. He's shooting his mouth off to everybody. Yeah, I found this bullet. I found this bullet. So he's telling all of his other fellow officers what he found. He's called in the office of Sheriff Bill Decker. A half hour later, he comes out and he's singing a whole different tune. No, I didn't find a bullet. No, then that was totally mistaken. Here's the pictures of him. Here's the pictures of him over the bullet. Yet now he's coming out and he's denying it. Now, these pictures were never released. It wasn't until many years later that these were not run in the newspaper. They pretty much buried the pictures. And so it wasn't until years later that these pictures came out. And so what was interesting then is that Buddy Walters then became the personal chauffeur for Bill Decker for 3 years. So that was sort of his reward, is that he got pulled off of regular foot duty, and now he's got this little cushy job where he is driving Bill Decker around as his chauffeur. And so now Buddy Walters is called to testify to Jim Garrison in his whole trial down in New Orleans. And you don't mess with the subpoenas of New Orleans or Louisiana. Their subpoenas are very, very strict. 1 week before Buddy Walters is supposed to testify, Sheriff Bill Decker sends him out on assignment for the first time in 3 years. He is supposedly going to arrest a escaped felon who committed a murder. As Buddy Walters opens the door, he's shot and he's killed. 1 week before he is supposed to testify to the New Orleans inquiry. So this, again, is one of those things, is that it all ties in, though. What he found with the bullet, what Clint Hill heard, etc., what Bill Decker saw with the ricochet, it all fits in, is that there was a gun in the trunk. It was fired off. The cartridge fell out. And then the whole thing is, how are they going to do this body exchange?
Now, you said cartridge fell out into the trunk, right? What we're seeing is the slug.
That's where it is.
Gotcha.
That's what I said, is that Clint Hill said, I heard the shot and I heard the thing cling. And then he also said he heard the echo. So boom, shot, went through the metal, ricochet. And then it thudded into the grass with bloody bone and matter around it. And then it's being taken away by FBI agent Barrett, and he is basically committing a felony crime. And we're catching him right here with this picture. He should have been put on trial and spent the rest of his life in jail. So now we have another real interesting, this is a very interesting development that's happened within the last 2 or 3 years of the whole JFK investigation, is that the Zapruder film, I have a copy of a person out of Australia who is, again, one of these researchers that I very much respect. He's still into the whole anti-Warren Commission, and he did die. But he was able to get a copy frame by frame of the Zapruder film, and he provided me a copy also. And at the tail end, when it starts off in frame 424, the Zapruder film goes dark. So the animation artists, and back in 1963, never thought about, well, one of these days this film is going to be released and somebody's going to pump some light in those dark frames. And that's exactly what happened. These were dark frames, and then now there's light pumped into them. And photographic experts have now looked at these frames, and everybody has all come to the same conclusion. There is someone who is sitting up in the right rear seat of the presidential limousine, and there's only one person that could do that, and that's JFK. So you can actually see the pillbox hat, you can see Nell Conley, and basically JFK sits back up. Now, there's been a lot of contention. They said, well, then Jackie pushed him up. Well, if she did that and he had this bloody head, then she would have gotten blood all over her shirt, and she would have then had that upper portion of her body with blood. So, but she shows up in pristine condition. So she did not push him up. He had to go up on his own volition. And he's supposedly doing this with a massive head wound and a massive throat wound. No way. The only way he could have done this is because he had a shoulder wound, and that was it, nothing else. Now, he may have had some injuries when that pyrotechnics device blew off by his head. I bet his head was ringing. He probably couldn't hear nothing at all. But he may have had a little bit of injuries by the debris falling, springing past his face. But basically, the only thing injury he had at this time was the right shoulder, which then he could very easily sit back up. So now we go to Stemmons Freeway. This is where the 100X now went on, and what was interesting is that there was a motorcycle officer for the Dallas Police Department was following. His name was Bobby Hargis. He reported that the limousine went 70 miles an hour, exactly 70 miles an hour, which gave them a lot more time. Here you are, have the President of the United States. This thing can go probably 110, 120 miles an hour easily, and they're doing 70. I mean, steady 70, all the way down. And so that just never has made any sense to me of why would the limousine just stay at a 70 miles an hour down Stemmons Freeway. But one of the main thing is now we're looking at is what we're looking at on the right corner picture of frame 15A is that the seat is raised at maximum level. This is when the 100X was delivered to the White House. And as you can see, this is the only Lincoln Continental anywhere in the world where the seat actually goes up and down. Then we look on the left side, and now when the seat is at its lowest level, we can't see that white piece of the back of the seat there. Now, the picture in the middle was taken by another, I think it was a presidential aide. And as you can see, we can see the white area of the seat. So while it was on Stemmons Freeway, definitely the seat had been raised. The question being is, when this frame was taken, was this seat being on its way to all the way to the top, or was it already at the top and it was on its way back down? But we definitely can see here the seat is not at the lower position.
Now, is this guy sitting on the trunk?
That is Clint Hill.
Yeah,
yes.
He's sitting on the trunk at 70 miles an hour? God bless him for that.
That shield stood and mattered because he had braces. There's braces everywhere, and that's what they did. Is if something happened like this, he had handles where he could hold on to.
Okay.
They could have done 110 very easily, and he could have held on. Now, it's also very established here, and it's also put in the Secret Service report, is the seat of the 100X was at its lowest position in Dallas, all the way through coming down Elm Street. It never was put up. But here we see the seat is up on Stemmons Freeway. So again, this is an indication that there must be some sort of body switch. Also, I asked the question there on the picture, where is the presidential couple? Where are they? And with the seat raised up like this, we should actually see them even better, but we don't. They're down on the floorboards. Why are they on the floorboard? That just doesn't, it doesn't make any type of sense of why would one be on
one might say if they're on a floorboard in case somebody else would be shooting or whatever, I guess that's possible.
Well, at the same time, though, it's always been the legend of saying that when they came out is that she then, when they pulled into Parkland Hospital, from the time they left Elm Street all the way to Parkland, he was laying his head in her lap. That was always the statement. We never heard anything about that they were down on the floorboard. So that's the official statement, is that his head was in her lap the entire way, which is not, we now see that's not true. So the next frame we see here is number 16. This was, again, a still picture. The person here on the trunk or on the back seat, that is, again, Clint Hill. And we see now, very interestingly, if you can see that, there is a foot over in the right corner. On the corner seat, there's something sticking out there. There was a guy by the name of Jack White, who was a very famous JFK investigator, and he said he saw another picture of this, and he thought it was the original. What was actually hanging out was a hand, and then the thing was airbrushed into a foot. And the reason being is then that they're now saying officially is that this foot actually belongs to Clint Hill, who is now, coming down into the trunk. The problem with that being is that if this, and in fact, that is Clint Hill's foot, his tibia had to be 4 foot long. And there's no way for that. So what was interesting is we can see here the testimony that Arlen Specter, when he was quizzing Clint Hill, this was the only question that was asked during the whole. About, and to me, there should have been 100 questions from the time that limousine turned left onto Elm Street all the way until it got to Parkland. There should have been boom, 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 all these questions, and basically breaking it down like minute by minute. This is the only question that Specter asked, and that was it, nothing else. So again, you can already see by just omission that the cover-up and the fake is really in here. The whole cover story is really in. Another interesting now picture, however, even though the 100X was destroyed 4 days later, or was dismantled, this picture was taken either November 22nd, 52 years ago tonight, or sometime on the 23rd in the White House, in the basement of the White House. And as we can see here, the blood patterns do not fit of the scenario of JFK being on the lap of Jackie. We can see here that there is actually blood streaming down the side of that back panel right there. So that means if this seat was raised up and the victim was brought with the head wound and rested there for a short amount of time, he bled, and that blood went down the side. Then they put him on the floorboard, and he even bled even more. And so, to me, this is, again, does not fit any type of pattern of JFK when he was then shot. Supposedly now Jackie is supposed to be, holding him in her lap. The blood stains don't say that at all. What this says is that there was somebody that moved out of the trunk, bled there for a while on the edge, and then was put on the floorboard, and then was put on the lap of Jackie.
So you're saying that the seat was able to be moved up high enough so that the people in the back could maneuver this guy out and pull the president in.
And for everything we see in that one picture, that height it was really high. So, and again, this is what modifications they did. Obviously, they did some really sophisticated type of modifications. The controls for this up and down were at the president's discretion. He had buttons right there where he could take it up and down. And as I said, it was established that everything was all down, and then we see it halfway up on Stemmons Freeway. So these blood patterns do not fit at all with JFK resting there, because how did the blood stain then get on the side? Literally, when you even really get closer on that, you can see the blood is underneath the little bit of the cushion. So how did the blood get underneath that cushion? Well, the only way is that cushion had to have been moved up. The victim was brought onto the edge there. He bled for a while. Then he was put on the floorboard, bled some more, and then he was put on the lap of Jackie. So again, we see a little physical evidence here that they didn't realize at the time when they released it that when you put all the pieces together, here we have another piece of physical evidence that's indicating that there was some sort of body switch. So now we have the next one is 18, frame number 18, JFK 18. This is Al Reich. He is an ambulance driver, very well experienced, had looked at hundreds of gunshot wounds, know what gunshot wounds are all about. He's seen a lot of blood. He was working for a local funeral home. He was standing literally at the door when the whole parade of people came crashing through Parkland Hospital. He actually saw the president he saw the body switch, he thought was the president, roll right past him. And then he got pulled into the back area of Parkland near Trauma Room 1. He was sitting there smoking a cigarette. Jackie Kennedy approached him, asked for a cigarette. He lit her up one, and then things went on. And then he was given the assignment of moving the body from the Trauma Room 1 table into the casket. It is procedure for them when they do that is they have to examine the body before they put the victim in. When he came in, the head had already been wrapped. The nurses had already wrapped the head. And so he couldn't see the face. So they lifted up the victim, and they looked. And what's most important, and we interviewed Al Reich 3 different times. Each time we asked him this question in different ways. He wrote a book about it. He did. If you go up on the internet, just put Al Reich JFK, and he wrote a book about it. And each time his story never changes. And that he said that when he looked at the back, there was no bullet wound in the back. There was no bullet wound on the shoulder. The entire back was totally clean. No blood, no nothing. And again, we quizzed him, and we tried to ask the question in different ways every time. And each time it never altered, never changed. He saw a clean back, no bullet holes. If there's any one person who is more qualified than him, it's only doctors and nurses, but he has seen hundreds and hundreds of gunshots. So he knows what he's looking for. And he saw a clean back, no bullet holes, and no blood. And again, indication that there was the poor switchman only coming in with the head wound and the throat wound. Oddly enough, when I was growing up, I lived in Dallas. We lived next door to a guy by the name of Charles Baxter, and he was one of the surgeons who was working on the throat. And it was his contention that throat wound was a bullet entry wound. No doubt about it. And when he walked in and saw the wound, it was bullet entry. And then what they did is they used that same wound and they made a tracheotomy out of the wound. And so, but the Secret Service, everybody tried to change his mind. They took him into a room and tried to show him the Zapruder film over and over and over again to kind of convince him that there was no throat wound. And he always contended that there was no throat wound. He's now expired. And again, the only thing, the victim that was in Parkland had a throat wound and a head wound. And that, according to this whole scenario, the only person that could have been, and that is the switchman who was in the trunk of the car. And Al Reich saw and confirmed this switchman because he saw no wound on the back, no blood, and no wound on the shoulder.
These are people who were on the ground, eyes open, right there. Not
yeah. Wrote a book about it, and so it had nothing. You know, we just got him as very genuine, very just right there with it all the time. So now the question being is that now we have pretty much now conclude, because now we've taken it from Elm Street to Parkland Hospital. Now I'm always asked, they say, well, where did he go? If he escaped, then where did he go? And how I got started in all of this also was a key thing, is that I was friends with a person by the name of Linda Goodman. She was a very famous astrologer. But before she was an astrologer, she was a Hollywood reporter. And she had all of these major contacts with people of every type of thing, from intelligence to Army, Navy, and you name it, and personalities, etc. And one of her contacts, then we got on a discussion about this in 1994. I was in a discussion with Linda about this, and she goes, well, you know, he's really shot in the shoulder. And I went, oh, and he lived. And I said, well, okay, then where did he go? And he said, oh, he went to the Russian-speaking part of Poland on a Baltic Sea in a hideaway type of thing right on the Baltic Sea. So what I did is I started looking, and this is JFK 19, and I started going up. If that is true, then I could find this resort. I can find this. There probably has to be some sort of helicopter landing pads, or there has to be airports. There has to be something around it to also support this. It most likely, at that time, I thought it most likely had to be a military base and something that could be really secure. So I couldn't find anything in Poland. So I went north, and actually into to a north there. It's like a state of Kaliningrad, and it's like Hawaii. It's part of Russia, but not connected to the mainland, but is part of Russia. And I started going up, and lo and behold, here I find exactly everything that would fit this. So this is not, it wasn't the Russian-speaking part of Poland. It was the Polish-speaking part of Russia. She got it reversed.
Yeah.
And so basically, and if he didn't end up here, he ended up somewhere, something similar to this. And this also goes back to is that the actuality that Tsar Nicholas also probably faked his death, or he was part of the whole thing, is that he went to Japan when he was a prince, and somehow the prince of Japan got into some sort of big tight spot, and they said, okay, and the prince got him out of it. Romanov got him out of it. They said, if you ever need anything, we're here for you. So basically, when the whole thing went down, he took all of his family to the Japanese embassy. They all dressed up as Japanese, and they escaped to Japan. And now remember, this is the second, he's probably one of the most richest men in the world, made the Rockefellers look like, paupers. And so for him not to know all the intelligence, not know what's going on, etc. So now he negotiates his return back, but he knows he's going to have to be in exile. And so there's a place like this would be perfect as a cover for his exile. And then also, it would have been perfect for something for JFK to go to, because in 1963, you might as well have been on the planet Mars. Nobody knew about this. And now it wasn't, when I started first doing this, when I discovered this in 2007, I tried to look this up on a map, and it's called the Mogic. And I started calling to travel agencies and et cetera. I said, have you ever heard of the Mogic? And nobody knew what I was talking about. And so it turns out this is a military type of base. There is a tower on side of it. And this would be something, though, that kind of fit in what Linda in her context said. If he wasn't here, then he was here at something similar to this, where it was a military base and it was isolated. And yet there would be some sort of luxury, even a small amount, be available to him. Because I contend that this one area is a swimming pool. What's interesting now is you can go up on the internet, but you cannot get any pictures inside of this compound. I mean, nothing. It's major restricted.
Google Earth,
yeah. You can Google Earth, but I mean, actually on the ground taking pictures, not from air. No pictures at all, nothing anywhere. I've tried, but again, 2007, there was nothing. It was interesting then is I kind of put this up on one of the JFK forums, and they immediately, people were already finding things. So this was like maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and I had not really done any more. I did in 2007. There was basically nothing. But now with all of the new type of services, pretty much broken down that this was a military base that belonged to the Germans, the Russians, etc., and it would have again be a perfect area for him. And now the next slide is JFK 20. We go back to Dr. McClellan, and during my interviews with him, I sent him and I emailed him pictures of supposedly autopsy photos that were taken of the body in Bethesda Hospital. One of the key things about this is that they were released as black and whites, but they were supposedly stolen. They were not officially released, and when they were released as black and whites. So you have all these pictures now up, and it's really graphic. I did not put the real graphic stuff up there, but I sent everything to him, and see again, Dr. McClellan didn't realize that these pictures were up on the internet. So, and if there's any one person who is more qualified to make comments about this, is because when he was holding those forceps, he was looking directly into the wound. And as you can see here, this is his drawing of what he saw.
Well, this is his drawing.
That is his drawing.
Okay.
Not anybody else's. That is his drawing. And so then it was interesting is that the JFK library had him and other doctors come in and look at their autopsy photos. And he said, there was actually a documentary made out, and each one of the doctors, when they came out, they went, gee, this is not what we saw. This is not at all what we saw in Dallas. These pictures don't really, I mean, they were like, we don't understand here. This is not anything we've seen. So I wanted to make sure, were the pictures that were on the internet the same thing that was in the JFK library? So I sent all these pictures to Dr. McClellan, and he looked at them, and he almost, when I was talking to him on the phone, he almost laughed. And he was like, almost bemused. He said, I said, now, were these pictures anything like you saw in the JFK library? And he said, no, not at all. I said, but are these pictures anywhere similar to what you saw, 52 years ago? And he said, no way. He said, these are ridiculous. He said, this is not anything, not even close to what the wounds that I saw. Which is interesting, though, when you go up on the JFK forums, I mean, they're going to have these major, major type of discussions about these pictures. And then I'll put my little blurb in there and say, well, I interviewed Dr. McClellan, and he, looked at these wounds, and he says it's not, and it's like I didn't even make a comment. They just kept right on rolling and kept on commenting. Again, they went into instant cognitive dissonance.
Well, I want to mention this now. This is a picture drawn by the man who saw the wound, Dr. McClellan.
Yeah.
And Kennedy was shot from behind, from that suppository building, right? How is it possible that the bullet came in from the back of his head and made a giant entry wound and went through his head with a little exit wound? I mean, it's the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where, again, that's where all the doctors said. He said it also when he first got there. He saw the scalp wound. He saw the wound on the right scalp. And then when he came around to the back to do the forceps, he saw the massive wound in the back. So, and this is, again, repeated by so many other doctors that they saw the same thing. Small wound, which would be an entry at the scalp, and a massive exit wound in the back. So, again, that has to have been that 45 that was shot off in the trunk, point blank range, boom.
I mean, anybody who's even a policeman on the scene of somebody who's killed themselves or whatever, I mean, they'll tell you that it's not what goes in and what comes out, which is impressive.
Yeah. So again, the whole Warren Commission scenario gets blown away, and also the persons that are sitting there and saying that he did get killed, but it was a conspiracy. Their whole plot just basically falls apart with all of this evidence. So here we are. Now with another little bit of piece of evidence that this looks like it was some sort of way of having a abdication of the presidency of the United States by fake assassination. I then showed these pictures, some of them, not all of them, but there was a certain group of them that I showed to key people. One of the first persons that I sat down and talked with was Secret Service agent Clint Hill. And I then rolled him, one of the very first things I rolled at him was the Secret Service report. He had just come out with a book, and that's why I was interviewing him under that pretext that I was asking about his book. It was called Mrs. Kennedy and Me. And he had this co-author by the name of Lisa McCubbin. And so I first presented him the Secret Service report, and it was amazing seeing his reaction. And then he said, well, I haven't seen this in many years. So he writes this book, which has a lot of the things of what happens in Dallas, and never referenced the Secret Service report. When I could look over, and this Lisa McCubbin, she wasn't on camera, but she didn't even know what we were talking about. So here they're writing this book about what happened in Dallas, and one of the key, almost Bibles that they should be looking at is the Secret Service report, and he hadn't seen it in years, and she didn't even know what it was. So this already tells you about the quality she is as a writer and reporter, and it also tells you about the authenticity, and very little of it in that book. So basically, it was just another type of cover job. And she also did another collaboration with another Secret Service agent. So basically, she has basically been this collaborator of keeping the lies and keeping the things going. And again, I'm now asking these real tough questions to Clint Hill on camera. We have 4 cameras on him, and I'm really, grilling him. And then basically she ends the interview. And then they accuse me of not being a real reporter. They're going to have me arrested. They're going to sue me, all sorts of things that I never heard from ever again. So that was my encounter with Clint Hill. The next one I also now showed these two was a person by the name of Mary Mormon. She took this picture right at the moment that it's right below JFK 20. It says Mary Mormon photo. And I interviewed her in November 23rd of 2013. It was the 50th anniversary. I was in Dallas for that. And rolled all these pictures to her and gave this scenario. And here she was. She was standing and took this picture and listened to all these reports and all these things over the years. And she looked at me and she said, finally, something makes sense. Finally. She said, what you have presented is the most sensible thing that I understand it. She said, this makes so much sense. And she goes, I'm really afraid for your life. You shouldn't do this. You're putting your life in jeopardy. And I said, many people have also said this to me, and I said, no, the persons who actually pulled all this off, most of them are all gone. And I would almost say every one of the persons who were part of this at the 52nd year, they're mostly all gone and dead. So that nobody's going to get punished. And the only thing now that can come out is the truth. And basically, they've got so many more control now of the mass media, et cetera, and there's so much cognitive dissonance. Even if we produced some sort of film of JFK in one of his hideouts, whether it be that magic or whatever, they probably still wouldn't believe it.
Well, let's look at this. I'm looking at this photo. We have it up on here for the people watching. What is this? What am I looking at? It looks like there's parts in the air over his head. Is this the...
Yeah. So that's basically, that's more of a black. That's the way the black and white film. This was actually done with a Polaroid, so it's probably a little bit of chemical type thing. As you can see now, he is leaning off to his left.
Right.
So that the first shot has gone off, and he's leaning to his left. He's
she's coming around with the puppet at this point.
Yeah. So now she's got that left hand, and now she's coming around. So, and again, so we can see the motorcycles on both sides. So there's no way that Clint Hill could have heard a shot going off with a cartridge hitting the thing, and that it would have been anywhere up around the grassy knoll or et cetera. No way. So it had to have been in the trunk. So again, but we rolled these things at one of the persons that was really interesting. There was an investigative reporter by the name of Jim Mars. And I rolled these pictures at him, and he said, and it's like this light went off in him. And he said, I was there for the recreation by the government on Elm Street. And he said they did their whole thing, and we're all standing around. And he said, supposedly it was all over, and we're all standing around. And he said, all the acoustics guys were still doing their thing. They were still on their microphones and doing everything. And he said a guy went out in the middle of the street with the 45 and shot twice with the 45. And he said we went up to ask him what was going on, and he said they wouldn't tell us what was going on. So that was, again, an aha type of moment. It's too bad I don't think Jim... we rolled it at him, and I said that basically what we're looking at here also is all the gunfire that occurred on Elm Street. I believe that probably Connolly was hit by mistake. Most likely they were all supposed to just shoot, and then be a cover for the pyrotechnics device. But most likely a shot ricocheted off the side of the car from the top of the door, and then it started to tumble. And as it's tumbling, it now rolls into Connolly. And that's why it does so much damage, is because it's now a tumbling bullet. And it probably was not done on purpose. They were supposed to shoot all around, but then Connolly got taken out, with the bullets, et cetera. So he may have also been actually then shot on purpose. Some other shots may have gotten him. That one probably was a mistake. But the reason also why they needed him to be shot is because now they're totally busy. And he's passed out. She's now just hunkered down, just holding on to the car. And so now there's no other type, when the body switch occurs, basically they don't really see a thing. They're just, so traumatized and just hiding. They don't see anything that's going on in the back. But what is interesting, though, is that Roy Kellerman died in the 1990s. He is the Secret Service agent who saw JFK with his left hand going to his right shoulder and said, I heard, my God, I'm hit. And there is quotes of his daughter saying that he told his daughter, he said, I cannot tell you everything that occurred in the car on the way to Parkland. Said, but if I did, it would basically just shock the world. So that's what he told his daughter. So it looks like we have, somewhat of a dog and pony show here, but people really did die, but it wasn't the persons we think it was. People also say, well, what's the motive? And there was a person by the name of Mary Pinchon, and she was friends with Timothy Leary, and she got a hold of some really high-quality LSD, and her friends then did a sort of a surreptitious way of trying to transform people in Washington, D.C. They would become lovers with individuals, high-powered individuals, and then take them on therapeutic, not partying or orgy or anything else like that, but therapeutic LSD sessions, which now the research is coming out and it's being proven that LSD is a major thing of helping psychologically shift a lot of people. when it's done in a therapeutic type of manner. So it's documented. There is no doubt about it that JFK and Mary Pinchon met in the Roosevelt Hotel in Washington, D.C. And basically she claims, and so does Timothy Leary, that he then did this major transformation with her doing the LSD type of therapy. And if you look at the last, 8 months of JFK's presidency, he really put his nose to the grindstone. There was a lot of changes he did. And so what's interesting is this LSD was developed at CIA laboratories, Sandoz laboratories, and here it's being used. It transforms one of their own elite. And now he actually, I think what he transformed into was actually a patriot. He transformed into an American. Rather than being a puppet of the elite, he became an American. And he started making decisions for America and not for the elite. And that's why he had to go. But he was still elite. The elite do not kill the elite. And so basically they swatted him on the shoulder on his way out. There are either two scenarios. Either that he knew what was going on, and this is all the type of thing, and they knew there was going to be a body switch, and he was going to go on and do his thing. But the problem being is that the shot on the shoulder was probably a surprise, and so that's why he shouted, "My God, I'm hit! What this is supposed to be a drill, or he did not know it was a drill, and he didn't know about the persons in the trunk. Jackie did, but he didn't. So there's two scenarios. He knew about it, but then they shot him on the shoulder, and he didn't expect that shot. And they did it on purpose. It wasn't a mistake. It was the rifleman who did it, and the person I think who did it was actually Lee Harvey Oswald's older brother, Robert, who was an expert shot and also very involved in military and CIA intelligence. So again, what we're looking here is we had motivation to get rid of him because basically the LSD that they developed in their government laboratories had actually turned one of their own.
Well,
but they don't.
I know that this has been talked about that he was doing this for treatment, but I do know that he did one of the two presidents who created their own currency outside of the bankers. Lincoln being the other one with the greenback, and then Kennedy had the silver certificate. And if you start to make your own currency, that's a way to get killed or pulled out.
Yeah, and he did that as a patriot. See, that's basically he was now doing it as an American patriot, as an American, not as an elitist. And they basically could not have that. So it was, if you were given the choice, and they may have also done that. Another scenario is that they came to him and said, "Look, you got a choice. We either can kill you really in public, or we can fake it. Which one do you want?" And so they maybe promised him, "Hey, you're going to write some papers as a pseudonym, as a cover story. We'll, take you off someplace and you can write foreign policy papers and that type of thing." And of course, they just double-crossed him. When they took him off to whether it would be the Magic or wherever it was, they basically made him into a prisoner. And it'd be interesting is Robert Kennedy, there's no doubt he was killed. There was no fake there. So the question being is, was he informed about Robert? And if he was, that must have been devastating for him. So my contention is that by the 1970s, he was already pretty much expired. That's another thing of doing all the investigations that I've done over the years now, and especially into his medical records, is that had the United States people known in 1958, 59, what his true medical history was, he'd have never been elected. In fact, he would have never even run. For example, is that he had osteoporosis and he had pins up and down his back and causing him excruciating pain. When they did the autopsy report at Bethesda Hospital, they then made a comment about skeletal structure. And the key statement made in the autopsy was there was no skeletal abnormalities. That's all they said about skeleton. When in actuality, here his back was full of pins. And there was a guy by the name of Delk, who was an investigator, and he was able to get a hold of some of the x-rays of JFK, and they found all these pins. However, the true medical records of both Jackie and also who was also on drugs, who was also very drugged out, is that they are now under the control of Caroline Kennedy. And if somehow she would ever listen to this program, or her heirs or other Kennedy family, release those medical records. That will say so much and give us the truth about what was going on for both her and her mother. What was interesting is that Jackie died of a stomach cancer that usually is caused by when you have taken so many type of barbiturate and amine-altering type of pills, and it literally eats out the lining of the stomach. So what's indication there is that they probably had her on drugs from that day forward. Is to keep her drugged out.
I want to add something in here. I heard a local radio show. These were, I guess you want to call them shot jocks. Steve and Gary were their names. They had a guy on, and they were talking about tapes taking from Johnson's library. And a guy went through and painstakingly listened to a lot of these tapes and was able to copy out tapes where this is days after Kennedy's assassination, quote, assassination, that you have Jackie and LBJ, laughing, goofing around. He's flirting with her, talking about sitting on his lap. She's chuckling and kind of getting giddy and all that. This is days after his...
And that's where, again, that they all knew. I believe that in ways LBJ fell on his sword. He knew there would be types that would come up and blame him. I think he left it open for that. And basically he took a martyr type of position. And so he's going to take a lot of heat until people actually come around with this evidence. You're going to have people, i.e. like Alex Jones and others, that they blame Johnson. And he was the one that actually did it, type of thing. When no, he was just part of the whole abdication of the presidency of the United States by fake assassination. He was just one of the major players. And
so this is why they would go along with it better, because Jackie, after all, she's doing the puppet thing and she's helping out on this, is that they knew he was going to go away to a nice resort, so to speak, and retire. And so it wasn't like they were planning on his death. But what they were planning on someone else getting killed. The guy in the Switchman was dead. So it's not. It's like, well, there is a murder going on here, but because it was a non-elitist or whatever, it's okay. Again, remember, they think we're animals. This is also
something to consider, too, is now we have the guy in the trunk. Now, when he gets to Parkland Hospital, they immediately put a coat over this victim so nobody can see him in the back seat. Now, they take him into the operating room, to the emergency room. They immediately put a mask on him. And now nobody can recognize him because of the oxygen mask. And according to Dr. McClellan, who was standing right there, once they pronounced him dead, he said it wasn't even when they said, the doctor said, we now pronounce dead, they immediately put the sheet over the victim's head. The nurse comes in. She really doesn't know what JFK looks like, and she wraps the head in gauze. So we really don't, nobody really ever got a really good look at the victim. And when we talked to Dr. McClellan, he said, had I really gotten a good look at his face, he said, what that meant is that I wasn't doing my job. And he said that was the attitude of everybody, is that if anybody would have gotten a good look, they weren't doing their job, which means it would have taken time to really study it and look at it and that type of thing, and they would have been derelict in their duty. So no one really had a look at the victim in Parkland Hospital.
Well, I don't understand the statement. If they would have looked at him, they wouldn't have been doing their duty?
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying, is to take the time to try to determine who this person is, or
that would be doing their duty, right? Yeah. Okay.
They'd be derelict in their duty by trying to discern and try to look at the face and get details. That means they're not doing their job. He wasn't doing his job on the forceps. The other person wasn't doing the oxygen. Dr. Baxter wasn't doing his thing on the tracheotomy.
Well, once dead, though. Once dead. You can kind of.
But then that's what I was saying. That they immediately, according to Dr. McClellan, they immediately put the sheet over the body. And so nobody really got a good look at this individual. So now think about this, is that Jackie comes rolling in to Parkland Hospital, to Bethesda Hospital with a whole entree of people. And they say, okay, we need to have an autopsy done. And there is a nurse sitting there, turns white, and she says, well, I'm holding the x-rays to the president here, right here. We just did the autopsy. So that's, that's not, we're proving that's legend, is that occurred, is that here they roll up with this body in the casket for autopsy, and supposedly there's already an autopsy been done. So there was a person in the trunk, but there also had to be possibly somebody, there may have been even a second person who was the victim in Bethesda Hospital, because also Al Reich put the body into a very, very expensive casket that the funeral home never got paid for. And then when the body arrives, it's in a very cheap metal military casket when it gets to Bethesda Hospital. So a lot of anomalies, lots of things happening. And again, we're only kind of like, we needed to, bring this down to 2 hours. There still is a lot of other little nuances, which I bring out. That also JFK had a watch that was very dear to him. What was interesting is that you can't see the watch anywhere in Dallas. Any of the pictures, you can't see any of his watch anywhere. And yet the victim in Dallas shows up, or at Parkland Hospital, the victim shows up with the watch, wearing the watch. So again,
so they took it from him. He's probably the president's getting ready. Where's my watch? Oh, we must have misplaced it. And he goes out and does his thing, and they had to go on the other guys.
Either that, it was already on the Switchman, before he even got shot. So because JFK definitely was not wearing a watch in Dallas. But a victim shows up in Parkland wearing a watch, his very favorite watch. So again, little nuances like that. There's also little other things that fit into the whole pattern. But basically, he turned American, he turned patriot, and they needed to get rid of him. But there is something that people can't wrap their head around: the elite do not kill the elite.
Yeah, I think there's probably examples where they do, but he may have been complicit in this as well. There might have been, he might have went along with it, so that that's part of not killing him, was that his advocating or what have you. Now I got an email. I got an email from someone who sent a picture of. It was in a tabloid talking about Kennedy being alive, and he got some pictures of him, wheelchair and all that. Have you seen that? Is that?
Yeah, I've seen that. Again, that's you also need to know that the origin of that newspaper, it's been now linked towards that. Definitely, it has links towards the CIA.
So it was a. So it would be a plant.
Basically, it'll be
fiction?
a plant story type of thing. Yeah.
Okay,
and it's put into a real. Very discredited type of publication. This happens all the time, where if you want to discredit a story that's really true, then put it in a rag like that. And then you get discredit. So nobody will take it seriously.
I remember seeing that a long time ago.
So do I. I remember when it first originally came out. That was like 20 years ago almost now.
And I did find it when I was presented with this before, but I can't find it again. It was the Sun newspaper was one of the ones who carried it and so on, but I'm not finding it now. She sent me a picture. I can't really bring it up because it's in another computer, but it doesn't have the headline. So
and basically they make the headlines. They show some ridiculously, obviously faked photographs, some text in there that really has no backup to it whatsoever, and then basically you can now say, well, this whole scenario of him living. We look at this rag and it's appeared here, so discredit it that way. Again, nobody has presented the evidence that I have presented here today in this type of manner, and a rag newspaper, or especially one that's had now proven connections with intelligence agencies, they won't run it. So we have to be, to discriminate when stories like that come out of what are they really trying to cover.
Right. Now, it's funny, going back and going through this, which you've done a very good job, very meticulous. You have eyewitnesses and so forth and so on. But on a post 9/11 world, in a post Sandy Hook and all this other stuff, including the current thing going on in France, there's been a lot of evidence that doesn't jive with the narrative. I think today we're more open to revisiting things like this and not being so naively skeptical, because we've seen so many problems. We've seen stories come up where the United States had put their own troops in radiation to watch and see how they die and all this stuff. We have all this backup that we're dealing with. I don't know what you want to call it, the leadership in the country, maybe behind the country, whatever we call it, has done some really terrible things. So that revisiting this is not that shocking, really.
Yeah, our motivation, when I say our, again, my silent partner and I, is that we feel the Kennedy incident on Elm Street works like a thread. It's like this hanging thread. And once you start to pull on that thread and you keep pulling, then wait a minute, things start to unravel, and you actually then go backwards and say, let's relook at Pearl Harbor again, of how much that possibly was also set up and fake. Look at all the other things previous to 1962, or 63, but then also look at it forwards, such as the Oklahoma City bombing, various other types of things that have been faked over the years. So it sits there like a thread, and all we have to do is start pulling on the thread, and then backwards and forwards in time, a lot of other things can also then unravel at the same time.
And then you only took one aspect of this part in detail. You can throw in the whole idea of the original gun not matching.
Yeah, there's
the fact that he shot those three guns from that one angle. I mean, there's all these other things that you lay on top of this stuff that aren't even included in your presentation to show that there was obviously a problem with the narrative.
Yeah, and that's where, again, there's so many things, as you said, problems with the narrative, and we could go on probably for 5 hours. But I tried to bring it down, distill it to what I felt is the most important aspects to really turn the light on for a lot of people. And again, this is going to be, actually, I'm going to link your thing to a lot of these JFK forums, and it's going to be interesting. A lot of knees are going to jerk. These guys, I've been kicked off of forums. Simply, I'm presenting the same way I'm doing to you right now. I don't do it in an emotional type of way. For me, when I first started into this, I really was not pro-Kennedy nor anti-Kennedy. I grew up, I was, 8 years old in 1960, and my father was an ardent Republican, and my mother was an ardent Democrat. My younger brother went to school on Election Day for 1959, and the bumper sticker, she put a bumper sticker for Nixon on the back and said Dad's Choice, and on the front of him she put a Kennedy bumper sticker and said Mom's Choice, and he went to school that way. So I grew up not really, he wasn't a villain nor was he a hero. And for me is that I have a lot more respect now for JFK because he allowed himself to embrace the changes that he had with that LSD and really tried to do some things. And then basically then they cut him short. So I don't have the hero worship, nor do I have the villain type of thing that you find up on these JFK forums, because if you mention anything that he was a human being, and if that at all tarnishes his either way, his villainous type of ways or his hero types of ways, they get very, very emotional. And they do not want to have their particular viewpoint of this whole scenario, slam up against their reality.
Well, I find this out doing the show. I've been doing this on my 13th year now, and when I have people on who have their theory about whatever it would be talking about, Atlantis, Planet X, whatever, and I bring up questions, just logical stuff that makes sense. There's a problem here and there. There is an emotional tie to it. And it's like I wish we could sit back and say, no emotions. Let's be, our emotion is to truth. Let's go for the truth, and then allow our ability to investigate and look at all areas and so forth, and just find the truth. I mean, I would think that the Kennedy assassination would be less emotional to find the truth, unless you are attached to your view, and your view, you base your ego or your life connection to this view, and now someone's come along and challenging it.
And you wouldn't imagine of how many people, again, attach JFK to their ego and to their heroism, and et cetera, and you challenge that, and it's just they can't handle it.
Yeah, and you're not challenging John F. Kennedy as an individual. I mean, he could have been a wonderful or a terrible person. It's irrelevant. You're just looking at the exit of office, the method of exit, for whatever reason. The reason of exit, we could, there's all kinds of, but you're just looking at how it happened. And it shouldn't be emotional. But I appreciate what you've done. I'll tell you what, I will say this, that I will open comments on the YouTube when I post it, but I will review them, and I will reject anything that's not civil. So if you want to disagree with this and you want to challenge some of the information, I mean, Brian, you're welcome to post there and respond to them. I will allow comments that are reasonable in their approach. I don't care if they like it or not like it. Let's be civil about it and bring up problems we have or extra information and discuss it.
Well, there was a really classic example of that. There was a forum leader, and when he was then about the same age I was when the whole thing occurred. I was in the fifth grade. I think he was about the same age. And his father and the family, he lived on the East Coast, and they packed up and they went to the funeral of JFK. So he had that really emblazoned in him about that funeral, and basically of how there was such a hero worship by his family. And so whenever I've posted things or done anything, he basically just comes at me ad hominem attacks, nothing with anything substantial, and just calls it all garbage. This is ridiculous, but then will not engage in any type of the facts, will not look at the facts, will not discuss the facts.
And I will say, too, for people who are listening, if they, hopefully they'll actually watch the video. I've had people who comment just on the title and not actually watch the video. But if you've watched the video and got this far, any insults, I'm just going to, even if you had a decent point, I'm just not going to tolerate, this kind of thing. You're going to be able to have an intelligent conversation, or don't bother. I don't need to hear any comment. So if you want to get involved in it, or just be civil about it. That's
all I ask is just let's stick to the facts. I am open, totally open. I have made mistakes, and I have admitted them on the forums, and I'm not, something where I feel like I've done all things perfect. But at the same time, though, is let's just keep it to the facts. And if they have something that's counter to it and it looks like it's going to work and it has some merit to it, I will look at it, and I'm open to also making my own shift. I always say this thing about the cognitive dissonance. It's also to challenge myself and saying you need to not also have that same characteristic. The thing I always keep mentioning is that I'm always open to any type of new evidence, and if it counters the evidence that I have, then let's go with it and let's explore it.
All right. Well, let me. Want to say something in ending here, because I want to start the ending music that I wrote, so nobody can claim copyright.
Well, again, thank you very much for the time, James. And this is just, again, a tip of the iceberg of all the things that are really out there that indicate that this was a abdication by fake assassination. And regretfully, nobody is a hero in this and nobody's a villain. They were just basically everybody was just trying to survive. And I think JFK was trying to survive, and so was Jackie. And the elite were trying to hold their position. They could not have somebody with enlightenment and be a patriot and be a president of the United States.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, all right. I appreciate the time taken to do this. He did a good job of presenting it. The graphics was excellent for me to work with, and I will post this as soon as possible. And we will keep in touch. I appreciate you coming here and spending this time to explain this all. A lot of work involved, but I appreciate it.
Thank you. Also, I have another website, the trivortex.com, trivortex.com, trivortex.com. Appreciate it very much, James.
Alrighty, we will see you.
Take care.
Bye. All right, well, there you go.
All right. Thank you very much.
We'll be back to continue next week, live on Feet to the Fire, and we will see you then.
Retell your timeless truths. Oh, it's your one. Feet to Fire is a production of IPS Media Works on the ONSIC radio network of stations.